In this session, we're going to discuss talent retention as a key challenge for many industries post-pandemic. This retention challenge is most accurate in the hospitality industry. This webinar will provide you with some employee retention strategies and, where possible, data specific to the hospitality industry. We will explore key concepts that improve employee engagement and retention. Before we begin, let me introduce you our presenter. Our presenter today is Hanif Hemani. Hanif is the president of Hemani Management Group, Inc., a management consulting firm specializing in performance management, human capital planning, sales management, and engagement. He is also the managing director of Express Employment Professionals, a professional staffing and recruitment firm. He has over 25 years of sales, marketing, and management expertise in diverse industries ranging from big pharma to staffing and recruitment. Welcome, Hanif.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to present to you folks on this very important topic. It's an industry-wide kind of phenomenon in your industry, in the hospitality industry, and you're not just the only ones. It's happening across the board. Retention's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. So just give me 1 second while I get my screen shared. Can you see that, Nick? Is that on the screen?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, let me just get that going here. How about now?
Yeah, we can see it. We can just see your reminders as well. That just popped up on your screen there.
Sorry. Okay, is everything running properly now? Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I will get started here, first of all, by introducing a colleague of mine, Deb Wiegers. Deb is going to be joining me on this particular webinar. Deb is a principal of Wiegers Financial and Benefits. She's a leader in the benefit space, and I thought it would be a tremendous asset for us to have her here to discuss some of the specific strategies as it relates to benefits and wellness, and we'll get into those a little later on. Both Deb and I are board members for the Saskatoon Club here in Saskatoon. Additionally, I am a board member for Discover Saskatoon, so I do have insight in terms of the tourism space. So thank you again. We know what the current challenges are in your industry, but in labor retention in general. There's high employee turnover. This can cause job-related stress, and I'm sure all of you have experienced that or have seen that. And ultimately, at the end of the day, this will affect job satisfaction, and it just becomes this vicious cycle that poor satisfaction leads to higher turnover leads to more stress, which leads to poor satisfaction. It just keeps on going. And as Nick said, this is probably most acute in a number of industries. We've seen it in the medical space and certainly in the hospitality space. And a lot of this started, it's always been there, but a lot of it has started to really become an issue post-pandemic. And I'm going to share some data with you to kind of get a sense of where you folks fit in the hospitality industry and why it's so important in the hospitality industry. So the slide I'm showing you right now is a slide that kind of allows us to kind of benchmark what turnover looks like. And turnover, for those that don't know, it's basically employees leaving within a year. There's both voluntary turnover and involuntary turnover. Involuntary turnover is basically asking someone to leave. Voluntary turnover is the employee leaving on their own accord. And what this particular slide shows is that in Saskatchewan, the average voluntary turnover is about 13%. This is from the CPHR organization, the Chartered Professionals Human Resources. This is the Saskatchewan chapter. So this is data from their website. 13%. So for every 100 employees that your organizations has every year, about 13% of them will leave voluntarily. So that's the benchmark. You'll see, and I don't like using pointers that much, but I'm going to use it here. This very end of the graph here, it says 12%. What that represents is that in that very small slice, those groups of businesses that were surveyed had higher than 25% turnover. And while it's very difficult to nail down what the exact turnover is in the hospitality business or the tourism business or the accommodation space, I would hazard to guess that it is somewhere on that 25 to 35% range. And folks that are online would probably be able to corroborate that better, but I would suggest that you folks are on that end of things. So it's a big number, and there's a lot of reasons for it. We understand that, but it's a big number. So what is the current state of affairs in the hospitality industry in Saskatchewan? According to a recent industry report, and this is from Saskatchewan Hospitality Report in 2023, the sector has seen a very unique set of challenges. We have a seasonal tourism business. This has contributed to fluctuating demands. And also, they've suggested that in addition to the already high turnover rates, these have gone up by as high as 25%. And so what's already a pretty bad situation has now gotten worse. And so it's certainly something that we need to address. In addition, the workforce dynamics have shifted here in Saskatchewan and quite frankly across Canada, where more and more employees are asking about flexible work arrangements and other sort of requirements that are difficult to accommodate in many industries, but particularly in the hospitality industries. And to add another layer on that, smaller boutique hotels, smaller eateries are probably more disproportionately affected, and their increase in turnover has been suggested to be even as high as 30 or 35%. If you are rural or urban, that also adds a layer to this complexity. So every single person, every single organization, every single business does have its own unique set of challenges that essentially you need to customize to address. And so that's why a one-size-fits-all approach is not the way to go. And as we go through these slides in this webinar, I really want you folks to think about what are some of the little things you can do to help improve retention. One particular strategy is not going to be a home run, but I would suggest that if we can make small changes in a few strategies, that will lead to an improvement. And I'm going to show you a slide in just a little bit to suggest that small improvements in retention can lead to large outcomes in profitability and other business measures. So the current state, to sort of finalize sort of everything, is that, and I believe you had a webinar a little while back on employee burnout and preventing burnout. Retention, poor retention can lead to employee burnout, and this becomes that vicious cycle. And so the idea really is to try to address this again in small steps, but as best we can. Finally, you all know this, but just to kind of show some data, that in 2019 compared to 2023, this is a national tourism data from StatsCan. The actual numbers of individuals went down by 6% overall, hoteling by about 14 or 15%. So dramatic changes in this space compared to many other industries where since 2019 to 2023, we've actually seen slight increases in labor. So you folks are faced with challenges keeping people, and even more challenges trying to find people. So it's kind of a double whammy that the hospitality industry is currently experiencing. The hospitality industry is it's a big umbrella, and there's many outfits underneath that umbrella. And depending on what outfit you were with, your demographics is very different. And so this also adds a layer of customization to the type of strategy that you might start to make some changes on. For example, in the food and beverage space, most of the individuals in the hospital in this sector are younger. They're under 25 or younger, and this contrasts quite dramatically with individuals in the accommodation space, where you see a little bit more of a even spread across the board, 65 and under. So the needs of a more mature employee from a retention standpoint and the level of customization that one needs is very different than the needs of a under 25-year-old and what they're looking for in terms of staying with an organization. So I think it's very important that as you start to go down this road around employee retention, and I do hope you look at it in very serious way, you recognize your demographics and some of the specific challenges that each of the demographics do bring to the table. Now, these are just 2 slides that I have. There's many more slides you can look at, but I just wanted to showcase the differences that do exist amongst the different sectors under sort of the big tent of hospitality and tourism. So I hope that makes sense. This is an interesting study that was done by Harvard Business Review in 2022. And I mentioned small changes in retention can lead to large outcomes. In this particular study of Harvard Business Review, suggested that a 5% improvement in employee retention, we're not talking big changes here, a 5% improvement. So if I'm going from 35% turnover to 30% turnover, 5% improvement can lead to up to from a 25 to 95% increase in profitability. Now, that's a big range, and it depends a little bit on a number of factors. But even let's just say at the lowest end, a 25% increase in profitability with just a 5% increase in retention. So I would argue that all you folks out there that have some influence in retention, if you can find small ways of making small changes which lead to just a 5% improvement in retention, there's some pretty big outcomes in hard dollars that come from that. And I would suggest, if I had people I could see it, I would say put your hands up if you'd be happy with a 25% increase in profitability. And I imagine everybody would be putting their hands up. And so it's something significant. And this is why, Deb and I are here to kind of help navigate some of the things that you can do to get there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this next point, but essentially we all know that employee turnover costs money, and it's been estimated that it's as high as 150% of their annual salary. So it's a big number when they go, it's a big number to train, and it does have effects on profitability. So one more slide of data just to kind of punctuate the point here. What you see on this particular slide, and the columns are 2017 through to 2022, and it's the average tenure in Saskatchewan in months. And so the average tenure in Saskatchewan in 2022, this is from Stats Canada, was 109.5 months. That's combined both full-time and part-time employment. I want you to remember that number. That's our benchmark, 109.5. That's about almost 10 years, a little shy of 10, 9.5 years is the average tenure across all industries, part-time and full-time in Saskatchewan in 2022. I want you to remember that number, because we're going to go very shortly into the hospitality industry, and we're going to take a look at what some of the numbers are in the hospitality industry. So let's jump into the both the factors that contribute to high turnover, but also the strategies, because the strategies do affect the factors. And I think it's really, really important. So no surprise, one of the strategies, one of the factors is total compensation and benefits. And again, we're lucky to have Deb here to help sort of give us some guidance a little bit more on the benefit side of things. The second factor is rewards and recognition. So lack of rewards and recognition being a factor. Strategy is how do we improve that? Flexible work arrangements. Again, this is something becoming much more in fashion post-COVID and is becoming more of a cost of entry these days with a certain demographic for sure. Growth opportunities and professional development. Time and time again, this becomes, do I have a career here? Kind of a question. Is there opportunities for me to improve my skill sets here? And employers that are able to provide growth and opportunities and professional development and a career path will have a better likelihood of holding on to good talent. Employee well-being. Again, this is something that Deb has pioneered, was way before it became something important. Now, she was well ahead of the curve on why this was such a big issue and trying to prevent burnout. And again, a number of industries are susceptible to it, one of them being hospitality. And finally, leadership and communication. I think this is a really, really important one that kind of encapsulates a number of things around vision and values and do I have a sense of community in this establishment that I'm working in? But the other part of leadership and communication is I'm not going to spend much time on it because we're talking about retention of existing employees. But one of the best strategies to retention is proper onboarding. And if we can onboard in an effective way, if we can be very transparent with employees that are looking to join our establishment about our expectations and a day in the life and what it looks like, we have a better chance of holding on to them because they actually understand what is entailed in this particular role with this particular outfit. And in a rush to onboard people, sometimes leadership will maybe bypass that just to kind of get people working, but then it ends up sort of biting them later on because the same individuals then realize this is not a place for them. So I just wanted to emphasize that we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is probably one of the most effective strategies for retention is actually getting the right people on board. And just to show you I'm not making this stuff up, this is again from CPHR Saskatchewan, showing what our current Saskatchewan business is doing for retention, and in no sort of specific order, but you can see flexible work options are on there. They're reevaluating employee compensation, wellness initiatives, onboarding and orientation programs that falls under the HR leadership banner, cultural building initiatives that's around values and sort of a sense of community, learning and development and recognition. So everything we just talked about is being done in some capacity across Saskatchewan. And so I think it's really important to recognize that. Arguably, private companies are spending a little bit more time on looks like on wellness initiatives. Public companies are spending more time on wellness than private companies are. And on the flip side, private companies are spending a little bit more time on compensation and maybe and less than on public companies. So some interesting data to showcase that these strategies are in fact legitimate and businesses are and organizations are employing these strategies. Okay, so let's get into the first strategy. This is compensation and benefits. It's no surprise that in the hospitality industry, a recent survey that was done by your organization suggested that 70% of respondents cited that competitive wages are the most important factor to retaining employees. Not a big aha. Of course, I get paid more. I'm probably more likely to stay. But what really are we talking about when it comes to competitive wages, number one? And is there a direct correlation between wages in your industry and retention or tenure, as we spoke about earlier. And if you recall, remember the magic number was 109.5 months, which is about 9.5 years, is the average tenure in Saskatchewan. So I'm going to show you a slide. I'm going to walk you through this slide. It's a little bit busy, but it's a great slide. So by organizational size, by tourism sector, you can see the average length in yellow of a number of those sectors. The lowest being food and beverage at 4.4, the highest being travel services at 15.2, and then you have sort of everything in between. So outside of travel services, every other one is roughly is lower than our magic number of 9.5. So no surprises. Food and beverage at 4.4. The second table, the table below, and I'm going to use my laser pointer again, I apologize. This table here actually shows you the 2022 wage in that sector. And if you look at the average tenure of length, and you look at the average wage, you'll see very quickly that the ones that have the lowest average wage also have the lowest tenure. The one that has the highest average wage also has the highest tenure. So it's a nice slide to actually corroborate that, yeah, compensation does matter. And if we can make small changes in compensation, our tenure does go up. And remember that rule, 5% improvement in retention leads to a minimum of 25% in profitability. So this could be one factor that we look at. The other part is not just compensation in terms of salary, it's sort of compensation in terms of systemic rewards. And this is sort of a new term that's coming up. And it talks about more than just compensation. It starts to get into the benefits and other pieces. And with that, I would like to invite Devin to speak to this particular part of this strategy. So Deb. Oh, you're muted, Deb.
Not a good start. Thank you, Hanif. Thank you for Tourism Saskatchewan for the opportunity. Yes, there's lots to discuss when we talk about the shift when it comes to rewards. We worked with Hanif and his company for, oh my gosh, probably beyond 10 years. Certainly has been exceptional in terms of providing us training in our organization, helping us on the recruitment side, helping us on the HR side. So it's a perfect collaboration. So we often say, my job's not to be the HR specialist, but I have to have a very high level of understanding in terms of what's happening in this space, because at the end of the day, everything that we do is going to be integrated into what the HR space is going to be looking for. So we have a partnership in terms of how we move forward. We're all looking for the same end result. We're trying to make sure we take care of our clients, take care of the employees and their families of those organizations. And there's been a fundamental shift in my many years, 35 plus years in this space. I've never seen such a shift so quickly in the last 2 to 3 years, and it's just ramping up. So it's important for us to get our heads around that. The traditional model in terms of how we used to do benefits, look at compensation, is not the same anymore. Our whole environment, our culture has changed. So yes, to your point, Hanif, I mean, it's now we're looking at systemic rewards. And with that, we talk about kind of the old way of looking at rewards in terms of compensation and rewards is not going to be enough. We've got a very, very quickly evolving workplace. We need to be thinking beyond that. So there's 5 things that we would think about. Obviously, compensation. It has to be competitive. It maybe has to be beyond competitive, depending on the geographic location of your organization, the size of your organization, the type of skill that you're trying to attract in terms of that upper management. It might mean that you have to go beyond what the benchmarking says is out there. That's not my space, but I need to recognize that's important. One thing that we do find, though, generous benefits, is that conversation. And I do say generous benefits because people are saying it's just not enough. You'd be surprised yes, benefits are important to people. When the survey was put out by Healthcare Canada, 50% or 48% would take benefits over a $5,000 increase in salary. So it's still important. A lot of people would think that benefits are just another cost, another layer, and that employees don't want it, but they value it. And so we need to be thinking of that. And one of the biggest integrations to that would be that health and well-being support. It's not a secret. This has been around. This is not new stuff. I mean, if we can only just look at ourselves personally and say, how do I feel if I don't get much sleep? I have a whole ton of stress. I don't eat properly. And I got way too much sitting on my desk the next day when I go to work. How are we going to be able to produce? How are we going to be happy and healthy, productive employees? It's not a great formula. It does not work. And like it or not, as an employer, we have an ownership in this. We have to make sure that whatever we're doing from our end is being there to supplement and help our employees and their families as much as we can. So there's a huge focus on that health and well-being. I know flexibility in your space of hospitality, it gets a bit tricky. It's manageable if you've got family needs that, kids need to be picked up at 3:30 or an aging parent who's not well. Yes, you need to flex your time. In my space, flexible benefits, customization, those types of products are going to be definitely on the increase. In fact, they are on the increase right now as we're speaking. And that fifth one, again, not my space, but pay equity. Again, with a very diverse in a population, we need to be mindful of all the different layers that we have within organizations, and we have to be careful in how we make sure we treat them fairly, right? So if we look at retirement, it used to be one of those things that kind of was left at the bottom of the barrel. I'm here to tell you, out of about 650 groups that we work with, probably about 30% of our clients would be in a position to offer group retirement products of some shape or form. And we've had probably the most growth in this area in the last year, and it's going to continue because it kind of pairs well with what we're seeing out there in that well-being space. So when we look at well-being, we look at mental well-being, we look at physical well-being, we look at financial well-being. And financial well-being is the biggest stressor now that we have. So if we don't take care of that place, you're not going to have a healthy, productive employee at work. And your risk is going to be many things. There's going to be a risk to the culture. There's going to be a risk to the injuries, occupational health and safety. And there's going to be a risk to your bottom line because you can track absenteeism. And if you were to take presenteeism, that person that's at work and they're not focused because they've got stressors, that's a 7 to 10 times ratio. So do the math. That's big. It's a big, big issue. We need to pay attention to that. So we're going to start to see the growth in this area continue for quite some time. A poll that we did, or that was done rather, revealed that 50% of Canadians under the age of 55 face challenges in saving. So it's not just enough to offer a retirement program. This goes way, way before this in terms of basic fundamentals, financial literacy. It has to be addressed. We need to help these people plan better from the very, very get-go of them getting into the workplace. And sadly, 76% of those Canadians, they expect to work longer longer than their parents because they have not put the right things in place in order to be prepared. And that's assuming you're healthy and you can go through those years and prepare properly. What happens if death or disability comes along, right? How's that family going to address those needs then? So it is our job to help those employees. And I know through some of the tools that we've done with our clients in terms of financial literacy videos, webinars, we go in and we speak to these employees. You would be amazed how many people really appreciate it because these fundamentals aren't being taught. Perhaps maybe on the old school where we got taught really easy. At the end of the day, you had a checkbook. If that checkbook didn't balance, guess what? You had no money. So, I mean, this is a very, very simple step. It's been missed. We need to back up the bus and we need to be there to help these employees be better prepared to plan properly for retirement and better prepared to be able to deal with those catastrophic things that might come along for them as well. On that third area, the health benefits. Of course, that's my space 100%. And we deal with life, disability, and the big ones that most people are very keen on is those health and dental benefits. So surveys, again, will say that this is a very, very important piece. We can't dismiss it. Yes, there's a cost. And unfortunately, those costs are going up a bit. Cost of living is going up. Therefore, cost of services are going up. Therefore, claims are going up. We know that. We recognize that. It's a real big juggle to be able to balance the two when we're trying to look at managing our budgets, but providing a very a robust benefit program for our clients. So there's going to be a value on some of those other things that really will play into that diverse workplace, because we have to think about it. We're not traditional benefits anymore. That's gone by the wayside. We need to be looking at things that will be really inclusive of the different cultures that you have within the organizations, the different ages that you have in the organizations, and even just with what we're seeing in terms of just what expectations are on flexibility of benefits. You take an organization, and I know, Hanif, you had a stat talking about, that 20-year-old right up to that 60-plus-year-old. One might say drug coverage is important. The other might say a wellness spending account is important. So how are we going to balance those needs between those employees? It can be done, but you have to be very strategic when you're looking at it.
Okay, Deb, in the spirit of time, thank you for that. I appreciate it for that overview. And again, this is a very big part of the strategy that we have to look at. We will move fairly quickly through these next few slides in the spirit of time. Obviously, I mentioned that one of the strategies is professional growth and development. According to a recent report by eHoteller, career advancement in the hospitality industry was a significant challenge, and many individuals sort of felt that they didn't have a career path within that organization. And in fact, a study done by the American Hotel and Lodging Association found that training and development opportunities were the second most important factor to labor or to employee retention after compensation. So as an example, Starbucks and McDonald's are good examples of organizations that do provide some level of training and education. Obviously, these are big multinationals. It's different when we're looking at sort of mom and pop restaurant in rural Saskatchewan. But the idea here is that if there's ways of creating some professional growth and opportunity, that would be one way of helping in the retention space. Do I belong here? Do I see a path forward? And if the answer is yes, you have a better chance at holding on to that employee. What are some of the options that you can utilize to help create growth and opportunity, internal growth and professional development? Certainly a mentorship program, if that's available with a senior employee or senior manager. If a current employee wants to move in that space, that would be something I encourage. Doing some one-on-one work with that employee. It can't be done for everyone, but again, keeping good talent is important. There's potentially some training programs you can invest in. Saskatchewan does have a joint federal Saskatchewan training credit up to $10,000 per employee. Each organization, I believe, has up to $100,000 that they can tap into. And that training program is a third. The employer would put in a third. The federal government would put in a third, and the provincial government would put in a third. And it's directly targeted to new employees, improvement in their skills, and existing employees, improvement in their skills, to then be able to make the next step to some level of a career growth. So again, I encourage you folks to look into that. If you have any questions or need some more information, you can always contact me after, and I can direct you to the right resource. The third strategy is around employee recognition and rewards. Deb spoke to this a little bit. There was a recent analysis by Deloitte that said there's a massive correlation between employee recognition and that was significantly associated within the hospitality industry as it relates to retention. Another study by Apollo found that reward and recognition are not only key, but an employee who was recently rewarded was 63% more likely to stay with their current employer for the next 6 months. So, again, small changes. These aren't big rewards, but these are small changes. These are performance improvers. They're moral improvers. And when somebody feels like they're doing a good job, that's another reason for them to really want to stay with that organization. So again, small changes lead to better outcomes in retention. Strategy number 4 is really around flexible work arrangements and work-life balance. Again, this has become more of a phenomenon post-pandemic for obvious reasons, but now it's becoming kind of part of our expectations in all sectors. I understand it is a little bit more challenging in the hospitality world, depending on what you're doing, split shifts, night shifts. Sometimes it's, 24/7, 365. I understand it's a challenge. However, we have to put our heads together and look for creative ways to do it. Personally, if it was me, the best thing I would do is I would ask my employees, what are some ideas? Because your team has a lot of great ideas about how we can improve this flexible work-life balance opportunity. And I'll turn it over to Deb again on this particular slide to speak to sort of her experiences here. Again, as I mentioned, she was really talking about wellness many, many years ago before it became kind of a thing. And so she was certainly well ahead of the curve. So with the spirit of time, Deb, I'll give you a couple of 2-3 minutes to speak to this slide.
I appreciate it. It almost would really actually be a recap because, I mean, again, flexible schedules is really, to Hanif's point, I mean, this is just putting heads together, finding out what the employees really like and don't like about what their schedules are looking like. How do we make them work for them? My side would be more on the flexible spending accounts, the wellness accounts. This is the word, right? Flexible, customization, personalize these experiences for these employees and their families. Again, going back to the wellness and the well-being, it's something that we can't ignore. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It doesn't have to cost any money. It's really just creating a culture where your employees feel that you're there, you care, and you're there to try and make their life happy and healthy, right? So, I mean, something so simple at our office that we do is a Friday. Every Friday we come together. It's positive thoughts, it's experiences. It's congratulating people on passing exams. It's just something so simple as that really does create that culture within. Physical, we well know if we're not physically, in a good place, we probably aren't going to be a productive employee, which comes along with healthier eating and weight reduction programs. So again, those are things that don't have to cost a lot of money. It's maybe just education, communication within the organization. The big one for us is the financial side. The literacy is going to be, there's a big movement in that space. 50% of employees, 50%, they stress about their finances. That's a big number. So we have to pay attention to that. And then we have to really look at the things that we can utilize through our space, the benefit side, virtual access. If we're dealing with the diverse locations, it's really nice to have virtual access for doctors, to reach out to counselors for employee assistance programs, that type of stuff. And then again, looking at those wellness spending accounts, how do we help that preventative side? Keep people healthy, keep people at work, keep them productive. That's really where it's at. It's just, to Hanif's point, let's get together, be thinking out of the box, a little innovative, and you know what, there is solutions out there.
Thank you, Deb, appreciate it. So, there's a lot that can be done, and a lot of it doesn't have to be very, very expensive. It really does mean that as leaders and employers and managers, we have to commit to doing some of these things and get to it. So I think, Deb spoke to this quite well, creating sort of a positive work environment, focusing on well-being. And we know that, one of the individuals that provided me with feedback on this particular presentation is a management company that managed multiple hotels. And one of the things that he said to me was, we try to create a community within our hotels. So not just a team, but a community. Now, not everyone has the luxury of doing that, but he said that when we can create a community, individuals are less likely to leave their friends, because now they feel like they're part of something. And that speaks to sort of this well-being. I'm part of something bigger. I value the organization I'm in. The organization values me, and it creates a little bit more traction, I guess, for that employee to stay just a little bit longer than they perhaps, would have. So again, not rocket science, but it makes sense. Which brings me to kind of the last few slides here. What does leadership have to do? Leadership needs to create that environment. They need to commit to doing these or some level of these types of strategies. The way to start with that is I would suggest is to do an engagement survey amongst your employees. So you have a very good idea. In fact, I would say that the engagement survey is the biggest single check that you can have to the health of the retention of your staff. And there's some very formal ones, there's some expensive ones, and some very easy ones that you can do. But start there because it'll give you a bit of a roadmap in terms of what do your staff, what do your employees feel like? And from that, you can start to develop strategies and next steps to improve their satisfaction. Often, people leave people. And when I say that, I mean training managers to be better managers and to be more in tune with employees is very important. Just because I was a good employee doesn't make me a good manager. And so it's a skill that needs to happen. And so leadership has to focus on some of those things. A study by Grant Thornton suggested that if you just focused on three things, focus on development, career development, focus on compensation and rewards, and focus on the perception of the organization in terms of values and culture. Start with those three and work on those three to improve retention. If you don't have an HR strategy, start thinking about one, because all of this falls under that umbrella, leadership and HR strategy. So certainly something to think about. The next slide I'm going to show you really talks about, I get questions around, well, what should we measure? You talk about KPIs, key performance indices. What should we measure? I'm giving you an example here of some of them that you can look to. Again, if you have an HR department, they would probably be able to assist you with this. I'm not going to get into the details, but certainly turnover rate, we talked about that. You can start to measure the cost of turnover. I've told you it's up to 150% of employee salary. Employee satisfaction, you can get that from an engagement survey. Employee engagement, which is a higher level of satisfaction. And career development. Were we able to take some people from our organization and transfer them through our system? And do we have a path forward for that? Do we actually have a document to show what my career path could look like if I wanted to be in leadership in our organization? So some of those things you can track, some of those things you can create, and some of these things you can follow up on. On that note, I did want to show you a very interesting slide when it comes to HR. This is in the province, the various industries that have a kind of a dedicated HR person, let's say, and it compares to Canada. And what's remarkable here, and maybe part of the reason why the hospitality industry is kind of chronically in this position, is right down here, hospitality and recreation. Not only is it one of the lowest in Canada in terms of HR professional penetration, and this is from CPHR Saskatchewan. In Saskatchewan, the bar in green, it's half of the national. It's 1% penetration. So when I am saying maybe get an HR strategy and let your HR individual start working on these things, I know full well that most of you don't have that. 1% of the hospitality and recreation space has a dedicated HR person to handle some of these things. So, as a thought, that might be something that you want to look at. Again, if you don't have these resources for a full dedicated HR person, let me know. I can certainly direct you to some options that are out there to help start putting some of this into action. Again, small steps make big changes. Some of the things that you can do with employee engagement Recognition will improve engagement. Feedback will improve engagement. If someone's not doing something quite right, let's have a proper feedback mechanism. So it's, I have a saying, Deb knows it, soft on people, hard on issues. Let's try to kind of have a proper feedback mechanism so employees feel that, they're not being criticized, but they have they're being maybe mentored or coached, as opposed to being criticized. Fostering team collaboration, doing some kind of team building events. We know that is one of the easiest ways to create a community, as my colleague said, becoming a community together. The other thing that he mentioned, as I said at the outset, the best hires are referrals of current employees. So people that are already bought into that culture, they feel that it's a great place to work. We have a community here, and we will, we want to bring some of our friends and family into that community. So onboarding, but now onboarding with as a referral. So these are some of the things that you can do in your organization that will help. I ask you to implement some of these strategies in a small way. If you're interested in connecting with us, get a hold of me. The final slide will have my information, and I can help direct you to Deb or to an HR resource or something to get the ball rolling in this space. Continuously improve. Just because we started the process doesn't mean it ends there. This is a continuous improvement process. Not only is it a continuous improvement process for your employees to go through, but it's a continuous improvement process for your leadership and your organization to go through. Start the process, measure, take a look. And finally, hopefully we can start to improve that turnover rate of the hospitality industry. At least you can, sort of one organization, one building, one restaurant at a time, and hopefully we can get there. So with that, I will say thank you for your time. We've presented a lot of information in the span of about 45 minutes. Hopefully there's some nuggets there that you can start to implement. And again, if you have any questions, Deb would be happy to answer them right now. And certainly if not, we can, give me a call. My email is there, my phone number is there. Give me a call and I will be happy to answer any questions, and I can forward whatever I need to forward on to Deb as well. So I'll stop there. Thank you again. Nick, are there any questions?
Nothing at this time, but again, if anyone does have any questions, just pop it into that Q&A and we can ask our resident experts what that looks like, and get you guys those answers right away. One question that did come up, Hanif, was about sharing whether you'd be willing to share your slide deck, and then the information or the resource around that training piece where it's that third of the employer, the third of the provincial, and third of the federal government with regards to that training allotment there. So
perfect. So yes, so I don't have a problem sharing the slide deck, just as long as everyone recognizes it is my intellectual property. I would share it as a PDF file, if that's okay, not as a PowerPoint file. I did spend a significant amount of time doing research on that. So, but certainly you're free to quote it and to utilize it. As far as the Saskatchewan, it's called the Canada Saskatchewan Employee Training Grant. I can send that link, or you can actually just email me at hanif.hemani@expresspros.com, and I'll send you the link for that grant. There's a bit of a process to fill it in, but it can be a significant amount of money that's available to the organizations. Okay, anything else?
perfect. Nothing else has come up at this time.
Okay. Well, then I guess we're
Job
done here. Excellent. Thank you, Deb, for joining me. I really appreciate it. As always, your insight is invaluable. And thank you for just saw a comment come up. I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. And thank you very much, everyone. Have a great long weekend.
Yes, thank you, Al.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us today, Hanif and Deb. And for everyone who's still on the call, thank you for joining us this afternoon for that great presentation. Again, if you guys have any comments or questions with regards to training that we are offering, feel free to contact us, training@tourismsas.com. We have more great training in the works right now. Our February and March schedule is out, posted on our business hub. So again, feel free to head over to our business hub, look at what we have to offer. Again, everything does come out in the industry newsletter update. So if you're not part of our industry newsletter, feel free to sign up. Again, contact us and we will be able to get you in contact and get you signed up on that list. There we go.